So, hi Wolfgang, welcome back to Airhacks FM.
Welcome, Adam. So, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, behind you there is no, I told you, entire conference. So it's Java platform and what else? Let's see. Continue container native application platform, right?
Yeah. It's a container native application platform in Kubernetes, and
cool.
on the other side, it's a whole Java platform with Java SE, OpenJDK,
Yeah.
Java FX, Java EE, Jakarta EE.
And you are wearing a Java 9 T-shirt, so it's a pretty
right.
This is already late in the game. My T-shirt is, I think, earlier. This is still from Sun Microsystems, Java, and you. So I think it is. Yeah. It has to be before 2009 because 2009, I think, Oracle bought Sun, right? Was it 2009?
This was in April 2009.
Perfect. Okay.
Right.
So let's see what happened in 2009. Before that, what I thought today, we should cover all the features, starting with JDK 1.0. And let's see how far we are going to cover that. And so JDK 1.0 started in January 23rd, 1996, and I was around that time already tried to get JDK 1.0. What I remember, I got it somehow before JDK 1.0, so it was probably 1995. I have no idea how I did it. And what I of course did was applets. So what's your timeline? You also started with JDK 1.0 a little bit later.
We started with JDK 1.0 as an emerging technology, and coming from C and C++, but more doing still C programming language in projects. Mm-hmm. And it was about mid of 95. There were something around that was a rumor on that. Yeah. And at that time, I was working at Texas Instruments, and so we had interesting views on Java, but called it at that time emerging technology.
Okay. And how you got your Java? You remember that? Because I think what I only knew back then was JavaSoft or Sun. And somehow it was possible to get the early bits. How you got yours? You know that?
Yeah, it was it was at that time over the internet. We had this channels, and
but my channels, I were official channels. I didn't have any secret connections with Sun or whatever. Yeah. I was able to download that as a preview, and I guess this was like a developer previews program or whatever. But I got it legally over internet without any secret connection, without signing anything. So this was my thing. And I thought you knew that because I was curious. Because what I always remember, I started actually before JDK 1.0, but I had no idea how I got it. Probably my university or something had it as well, so I had no idea. But anyway, so I did it with, I started, of course, with applets and Hello World main method, and which confused me a lot because everyone said, Java is portable, runs on different operating systems. And for me, it was, it is, it runs everywhere, but I still have, to do the Java thing. So what I like in C is I can just, execute the binary, and I had always say Java and something. So, this is like a, fake portability because I always need the Java. So this Java virtual machine concept, I didn't like it at the beginning. So it was, for me, it's like, a fake portability, What is your impression of Java? You got it immediately or?
No, that was something we really observed through the back door. Out of that Texas Instruments software part. Mm-hmm. And we shared this with colleagues there, and I think you need to be registered at that time. Mm-hmm. But we got one copy. I don't know who was first got it, mm-hmm. But we did exactly the same. Mm-hmm. And the big question was, hey, what is it for applets and this stuff? And it was not confusing. It was more attracting. There is something different than we did before.
Yeah.
The breakthrough comes with the Mosaic browser at that time. Yeah. And that goes along, and then you saw the applets and Hello World. Yeah. And I was always asking myself what was first. Yeah. We saw the applets, and then we did some calculations. What we have from Pascal, from C, these normal programs around Hello World. It was different to the Hello World, some calculations. And we saw, okay, there is just something different as a new language, but what's up with the browser?
Yeah. Yeah, what I remember is that we had where I started first was HP UX workstations, and they were, for that time, fast machines. But if the applet started, they did a lot of work. There was a rectangle on the screen. And then I saw Duke with, I remember this exactly, with, how it is called, air pressured hammer, you know what I mean? So it was like, road work where the workers having, like specific tools to break up, the tarmac. And this is what the Duke did on the screen, which was fancy. But for me, I say, yeah, but what to do with him, And I took a look at the code, and this was like animations where the GIFs, or I think GIFs were replaced. This was timing animation. And what I also remember is, I don't think I use, this I'm not sure anymore, the Mosaic or Netscape browsers. What I used at the beginning was Applet Viewer.
Yeah,
and I think the Applet Viewer shipped with JDK 1.0 already, I think, because this is what I started with the Applet Viewer, right?
Yeah, and this was later on with JDK 1.1. Yeah, so this was just observation, the version 1.0 from the JDK, and then I joined Sun at that time at 97, and there were JDK 1.1. Yeah. And this was interesting. So we had Sun workstations with System 5 Release 4 and the upcoming Solaris operating system. And this was a full stuffed workstation with Mosaic browser and all the tools you mentioned before, and all the set of nice graphical parts, what we didn't saw before. At that time, we could remember Silicon Graphics and the SGI workstations. They did a lot of stuff in simulations, and it was amazing. Yeah, and PageMaker workstations were used for to edit layouts from text behind LaTeX, and this was the area where the workstations were in, and so we all said, okay, what about Java? And that was good. We had the pre-impression of version 1.0, and with 1.0, we had a lot of more stuff inside. The AWT event model for the graphical user interface as baseline at that time. It was a major breakthrough. Beside some different internals of the Java programming languages. And therefore you can store something. You had communication, and this was something what later on was used in application servers. So JDBC drivers, RMI for communication, and this kind of stuff was a baseline to work on. With later on the application servers, they came in that time frame in 1998.
What I remember back then is this was already funny conversations, because I think I spent already time in commercial projects, because what I really remember is, and this was a little bit later, of course, because the adoption came later. I guess it was around 1998 or 1999. And what I remember is the following: the huge debates and discussions about JDBC. Because what I heard back then is, it will never work because it's too much abstraction, the JDBC. And you should always use, the Oracle driver directly, because they always, you had the discussion with developers. No, JDBC is too far away. You needed a bare metal access to the Oracle drivers. There's always Oracle, it was leader back then, the database. So we mostly used Oracle. I would say sometimes ODBC, as a hack, to access the access. So this was a big deal. So JDBC ODBC bridge was huge back then. Then the JDBC Type 2 driver was native, and the thin driver came later as a best practice. Before then, mostly we used the ODBC bridge and the Type 2, which was native. And and this was funny because I got the same discussion over again. APIs are too far away, abstraction doesn't matter, specification doesn't matter. And this was the very first time I remember having this discussion that you cannot just introduce API afterwards. You always have to use the classes. And JDBC was huge. RMI was also interesting. So my first project with RMI was actually for, I think it was a football club in Germany. I built a chat based on RMI and applets. And it actually, it worked. So the cool story is I did some marketing. So I went to I don't know where I was, but I said, hey, look, we have a new, a new chat, and it just took off. I mean, so we have several hundred people in the shortest amount of time, and it was, of course, what I remember is the user interface was really not that nice. It was AWT without any modification.
Right.
I'm a developer, so I had no graphics, not just it looked terrible. But I was already amazed about remote method invocation back then. And what I also had to do back then is, I don't know whether you remember this RMIC. There was a specific compiler which compiled, the stubs and skeletons. So you had to write an interface which extended from remote, I think, and had to throw, remote exceptions. And with the RMIC, you get generated clients and servers. So why I'm mentioning this is because, now we have another best practice frameworks, like, for instance, gRPC, which are almost identical, and everyone at the beginning, they say, okay, RMIC and Corba, they are old-fashioned. This was the term, old-fashioned, And now, the more modern from Google, this gRPC or the other frameworks are using very similar approach, technology approach, to generate. And this is as painful as it was before, or very similar to it was before, and no one complains anymore. So this was this is the interesting part. Yeah. Like, some technology seemed to be abandoned because they were old-fashioned, and the new technology are identical, rebranded, renamed, and everyone seems to be happy. So I think what's nice is, or what you should do as developer, not to forget, your history. So if you don't forget the history, probably you won't make the same mistakes. And this is like, we see every 3 years complete reset of the history, and they try something new, hot, which is exactly the same as it was before.
This was exactly the direction I thought. And of course, this was a basic set at JDK 1.1, a basic feature set.
Mm-hmm.
And so just you can reflect your classes and building the inner class methods on that language. But the potential to grow was to adapt to the databases, existing databases. At that time, people were modeling the entity relationship diagram for their whole enterprises. So without JDBC and RMI, we didn't make any progress at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So RMI wasn't optimized. This is the case. We used the WebLogic T3 protocol,
exactly.
Which was 10 times higher, optimized the objects, bundle this, and just ship it as a whole package, as a bundled package over the network. But why? You mentioned it with RPC, remote procedure calls, and this stuff. What we did before? How did we did that before? We had dedicated graphical tool sets, to build an UI. Based sometimes on workstations, and having the interaction from client-server applications just one-to-one through the server cross remote procedure calls. So it was something mapped to a new programming language. If you think about how we did this stuff, UI and menu control, and client-server communication on C, There were only a few parts, but the main parts to build this architecture on Java. And exactly in 1997, we started with one large logistics company in Frankfurt. Then is it possible to use this subset from JDK 1.1 for enterprise applications? And there were doubts, 1 year of doubts about that. And this was each feature, and the main features were JDBC, access to the database. How could this be? And is this something reliable to use an ODBC bridge? And this was sometimes really bad because we didn't get the performance, the throughput for the datasets to get the records out of the database and just to show this in an UI. So this was really a paradigm change on that.
What I also remember, the retooling of AWT, this is what I read now on Wikipedia, the retooling of AWT was, I think in JDK 1.0, you had a global event handler. It was something like on event, and then we had a finer grained. The dispatching happened in JDK, so we could register, how action performed basically was introduced, I think in JDK 1.1. So this was the retooling, which was huge. What's inner classes? They were very important for visual builders like Borland and all the others. They generated tons of inner classes. So this was, I think, a huge step towards code-generated UIs. JavaBeans. So this is what I was a bit excited. So what I play a lot with, remember the Beanbox? The Beanbox, This was like applet viewer. So you could, it shipped with JDK. Probably, I don't know where it just disappeared. So it's amazing that it's not there. And the Beanbox, you could start and you could just wire your beans together. So it was like Java Studio Workshop from Sun, but a smaller version, which shipped with JDK. And I bought my first book, first JavaBeans book as it came out. This was just a book about JavaBeans from O'Reilly, what I remember. And but I was not sure what to do with it. And back then, JavaBeans were actually only introduced for the user interfaces. So the idea is, if you have common structure of the classes, you can rely on it, and then the visual builders can use the metadata to generate user interfaces. There were lots of we had several projects to investigate on that. You could have your own bean editors. So this is like snippets who created for you the visual representations. Of course, what remained were getters and setters, that the private fields have to be exposed via getters and setters. This is the reminder of the JavaBeans. And this is one of the worst reminders, because back then, the user interfaces knew, okay, if there's a getter and setter, I can just call it using reflection. And they will set the state. And now developers think, they have to do it because of hiding the state of the objects, right? And encapsulation. And so this is the JavaBeans spec. It was huge, actually. It still is. So I remember it was several hundred pages, just the specification of JavaBeans. And on the interesting part, so Enterprise JavaBeans came later, but I did from time to time courses for Sun Microsystems, so as a freelancer. And I remember in Enterprise JavaBeans course, there was a student who was really disappointed, and he was not happy. Everyone was somehow happy, but he was absolutely, sad. And I say, hey, what's the problem? I mean, and they say, yeah, but because, this is already Thursday, and there are no user interfaces. And I meant, yeah, but this is, we are building backend applications, and he waited until I do something with user interfaces. And I asked him, yeah, but there will be never user interfaces. Say, no. It's like, no, because he knew JavaBeans, and he thought, the enterprise JavaBeans is an even better version to create enterprise user interfaces. And he thought, my introduction took too long, with the enterprise JavaBeans, and he waited until something happens on the screen, and of course it didn't happen, and then he got it. So he was somehow, happy, but he was expected to come back, to the company and improve the user interfaces. And with the gained knowledge in the enterprise JavaBeans course, of course, it was impossible. So I think the naming of JavaBeans and enterprise JavaBeans is not that, appropriate back then. So it caused a lot of confusion in lots of companies.
Yes.
And the last thing is, we already mentioned reflection. Back then, I also remember, I think Java Magazine, the German magazine, was already around, I guess, because what I remember were articles. And there were separate articles about introspection and reflection. So we don't do the distinction anymore. But back then, introspection was like, to find out what the object does, and reflection is influencing the object. So there was huge debates and articles about introspection versus reflection. This is what I remember from the reflection time.
Yeah. And at that time, all the features were judged by the technicians at that time, because they had different experience from other programming languages. And without a programming language, without an UI, is always difficult. Because you have something where you need different parts to bind in, and do all the stuff with the objects you get. How would you work on with that? And in our times today, if I will be asked for new programming languages, and I always state at that particular programming language upcoming, please, you need to have an UI, at least to show something as an example. Otherwise, it's too far away. Because if you say you can do this with everything, the UI, so everything is possible, but it's not yet feasible in a programming language. So AWT with the extended event model was an initial part. Otherwise, you can't show it. And the whole applet stuff, it just attracts people from the UI side and not from the hard part of JDBC or RMI or later upcoming application servers, just to say something like middleware. At that time, we had client server. We had just two parts, the client and the server, and we don't have anything between. And maybe the workstation was a rendering engine with all the animations and stuff as SGI. But this was totally new, that you can decompose something. And there were some confusing parts, as you mentioned. So many namings are like JavaBeans, was initiating something different at the reader as it was. And the naming with Enterprise JavaBeans later on was a total different understanding. At that time, people got in the first impression.
JDK 1.1. What I remember as well, the size of the JDK was around 5 megs. Everything. So why I know it? Because 5.2 or JDK 1.0, probably JDK 1.1 was larger, but it was still tiny. And I think it was not rt.jar, it was classes.zip, I think, where all the classes were. It was in one point renamed to rt.jar. At the beginning, it was like one archive. And I downloaded everything always with my US robotics modem with 33.6, which I really like the modem. But this is why this was like, for that time, it was huge, of course, but for now it was tiny. And what I also remember, that the just-in-time compiler was introduced around 1.1.8. So, and this what we waited in a project, and this improved the performance a lot. So the startup time was very fast. So it was, like almost a new release. So this is what I remember. So we waited for the 1.1.8 release, and this was really exciting times. And with JavaBeans, one of my first projects, what I did on my Peacock notebook. Remember the Peacock company?
Yeah, right.
On my Peacock notebook, and we built a JavaBeans editor. So we could create, like, it looked like right now microprofile config, something like this, but with JavaBeans. And you could serialize the JavaBeans and send them to the server, and the server used them for configuration of a CMS system. So, and with this 1.1.8 did a huge difference for us because, the editor was easier to use. So another story, you probably will remember that, JDBC. So one of the reasons why Java became immediately so popular in the backend, at least in my project, was you could save license costs. And the problem was, back then, all the database companies, everyone, you had to pay per connection. If you introduce something running on the server, and this was just RMI server, very simple server, we had a very simple connection pool, and we could immensely reduce the costs. So with such projects, we could drop the costs in percentage. So I remember we were in an e-commerce project, and with the introduction of a Java middleware, we could reduce, let's say, Oracle cost back then by, 90%. And the problem, of course, is the sales people from Oracle back then, they were completely confused because they had no idea how to deal with the situation. Because we only used, 5 concurrent connections, and we had, 20, 30, hundreds of users. And this was completely legal, but this was like, no one expected doing something what we did with Java. And with that, we had already a lots of projects because there was a business case which was unexpected. And this was possible with JDBC. We, of course, had to build our own JDBC connection pools. So we built several, but it was not as problematic. It was, of course, problematic connection leaks or whatever, but it still paid off. And the last thing is DevOps. So what happened back then is we got a question which server you would like to have. So, okay, of course, nice one. Sun, no, that's too expensive. So we got a Hewlett Packard usually. So it looked like a cube. And we were in charge of installing everything on it with admin rights, and then the admins came in and just, changed the users. And sometimes we even had to to order the internet. So we were asking which connection we are using. So we were in charge of everything, which was, this was just, if I was asked back then, what's your profession? Sometimes I said webmaster because it was we did everything and no one cared whether it was Java or PHP or whatever. right? And now I would probably SRE manager or SRE developer or DevOps or whatever would be fancier. Think. You remember the story with JDBC and pooling and licenses?
Yeah, exactly. that was something. So for Sybase database or Informix and Oracle, it was new because Sybase did it in a single user mode linking. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they got fast applications, client server applications, and now you had something different. Yeah, mm-hmm. And the whole scene was about between single user and multi-user mm-hmm. from the conception mm-hmm. of the client server application. Yeah, mm-hmm. from C mm-hmm. Coming. So this was totally driven by the database connections. Mm-hmm. How fast you are in these benchmarks. Yeah, mm-hmm. And the number of records inside. Yeah, mm-hmm. Was just increasing at that time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, from to terabyte database. This was future talking. Yeah. And so the discussion was to bring it on a point. It was we can run the database with one technical user mm-hmm. Out of the collection pool. Yeah. And this was something. This paradigm change was later on a driver to change the license policies for all the databases.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the model was broken. Yeah. It comes from client server before.
Exactly.
It was running through remote procedure calls through connections. Yeah, mm-hmm. and pushing the throughput. Yeah, mm-hmm. and the benchmarking, the optimizations. Yeah, the mm-hmm. tuning stuff. And this was not obsolete. But we had several decomposed parts, yeah, like the JDBC and these connection pools, and later on multi pools on the application servers, mm-hmm. just running several pinned JDBC drivers, yeah, mm-hmm. which are different and optimized for the database. Mm-hmm. And there was just a small portion of time the vendor changed their policies, yeah. Mm-hmm. All the database vendors, but the way how to develop with Java, it was brand new at that time. Yeah. And besides the doubts I mentioned before, people just jumped in this new language paradigm to decompose everything. Yeah, and we said from a C look, okay. What else do we need? Yeah? Yeah. What can we expect in the next release of Java?
Yeah.
There's slightly a little magic. Surprise! What feature is next? But if you think about one programming language or many others you knew before, yeah, you think, hey, that is an initial part. It need to come up as well in Java, and okay. it need to evolve and to optimize.
This is interesting. So back then I was a young developer, and for me it was magic. So I had no expectations. So whatever it came, I was completely fascinated by it. And I say, okay. And I thought, like Sun is a kind of a software god, they know exactly what happened and we just have to follow them or whatever. This was the first releases of Java. This is probably why I'm still excited about Java, because of the early days. So back then was just fun. I had, to follow what happens in Java and you learn a lot back then. Do you actually remember the systems? Not conference. It was a trade show in Munich.
In Munich, yes.
You attended this? This was like CeBIT.
Maybe one time. Yeah. It was a local conference in Munich called Systems.
Yeah. But it was as local. You have to. I remember. I attended several times exactly at that time, 1997. And as Java came out, this was so it probably was 1997, 1998, around that time. We had traffic jam at the highway. So there were so many people, they were not even software developers. Everyone wanted, to see what Java actually is. And I attended this system several times. And one, I even had to speak. I don't know why. So this was like strange in a booth or somewhere. But just attended as the systems to see what happens there. Just as And back then Java, everything started with J. And lots of projects were coffee branded, which was, of course, very nice to me because I still like coffee. And back then I was crazy about coffee. And what I remember, there was like a German company called Cappuccino. And what they did is e-commerce solution with JavaBeans. And they had at the systems, it looked like, skyscraper. It was brownish with Java logos everywhere and coffee beans. And there was like multi-stories booth where you can actually walk up and they tried to sell, huge applets, which were e-commerce applets like Amazon, everything in applet. So this was this time around. It was crazy. So it's not like, this is, I think, crazier than what we see right now with whatever, JavaScript or whatever. Back then it was, or Kubernetes, back then it was a way crazier because everyone was interested in Java. So this was most of the people were not developers at the systems. And they were managers, they were CEOs or whatever, and everyone wanted just to have something with Java. And if you have already J, in the name, you are already on the bright side, right?
And that was something. So I always attended the CeBIT at that time, what you mentioned, and this was amazing because there were several halls just for databases and for so-called 4GL languages.
Yeah.
And in client-server technology, like Uniface, you had 4GL languages, and we always compared, build your menu from scratch, like you do this with JavaFX, or before with Swing, based on AWT. But this was a clear evolvement in Java. Mm-hmm. Before, you need to have the tooling for UI tool sets and Uniface and this kind of things. And in these halls, there was no room space in Hanover CeBIT Fair. Yeah. And so we were, I think we were in hall number 1 with Sun, mm-hmm. and there were large booths, and they had the government administration there, always Chancellor at that time opened up and joined some spaces, and there was really an interest if something from the government comes to the Sun booth in Germany at the CeBIT and opened up the exhibition, and this was a tremendous start of that language. But there were a lot of people at the CeBIT. They were specialized on computer technology, and we just separated at that time from hardware to software. Mm-hmm. What do you need to run? And there was always a misperception at that time. You need a big workstation from HP, from Sun, from SGI, and it's not the software, it's the hardware. Mm-hmm. And we said the opposite. We said, no, it will be Java. Yeah. It will be something different, evolving. Yeah, mm-hmm. We just decompose it, and maybe it had some benefits. What was difficult, complex before in C++, because you had a drain of lack of people getting to that space are capable mm-hmm. of programming like what you want in C++, mm-hmm. And at that time the opposite on Java. Many people was attracted by the language, and what we said here was 1.1, and there were more things are missing than we had, but with a few things we had, we could build these applications on distributed systems with upcoming middleware. And people just were attracted by Java. Yep. And saying, now what you called, maybe it's magic from Sun. Yep. But on the other side, you need to know what do you have, and you knew it if you had some language knowledge before. But on that time, it was a really game changer overall. Having young people working with that and proving this at enterprises that it's capable, and this was really the 1.1 release of the JDK was a major step forward, and then more and more people comes with 1.2 mm-hmm. on that level.
What I remember, there are people that I interestingly, so my commercial success as a consultant was not that great before 2000. But the problem was, I try if I got questions from clients, can you do this? I always sometimes had to say no, because they were this was like crazy. So in one project, I already mentioned it. The business department wanted to have an interactive software. It looked like Karl Klammer, I think, is the guy from Word. I don't know what it's in English. There's like this small cute thing which suggests stuff. It's no more there. And there was something like on e-commerce shop. They wanted to have that with Java as a backend. But of course, back then we should not forget the best practice was ultra thin client. So everything had to be in pure HTML without any JavaScript or CSS. So, and they wanted to have from me to have something built in pure HTML, a sales agent with AI, and I say, okay, this artificial intelligence is, I think, really hard to build. I mean, I cannot do this for you. And they say, okay, if not, we can have a call center. We can have backend people who will interact one-to-one with the buyers. So, okay, this probably won't scale, but I mean, this is just crazy. And I said, it is really hard, if not impossible. And there were several companies here, around Munich. They say, okay, of course we can do this, no problem at all. And everyone said yes, yes, yes. And this is from the beginning of the software. It's like, it is crazy world. I mean, how they do it. And what I learned later, they had no idea. They just said yes and no to everything. And this is why lots of projects were not that successful. And the cool story is, after the crash, New Economy, which happens around JDK 1.3, so we have some time.
Yeah,
so
it was later.
Yeah, then if I say, no, it can be problematic, then I got the job. So no one was interested anymore to always hear, yes, yes, we can do this. And this was, this, until JDK 1.3, I always said, we can do this. This was in one project that they tried to have, a remote data types. So like remote integer. So if you have one integer and you change the value, it will automatically change on the server. And I mean, try to build the application. This is even worse than serverless, I would say, right? Lambda function. Yeah. I mean, this is to try to make it. And those completely unrealistic ideas and came from that time. And it was sold in huge rooms with rich people, and they sitting there and say, okay, we can do this. And it was like very, very, how to call it, a mature conversation about completely unrealistic, stuff back then. Science fiction.
There were a lot of misunderstandings.
Yeah.
But at that time, from 1998 on, with Java J2 SE 1.2, the initial evolvement of the graphical API was a major milestone with Swing.
The last thing was JDK 1.1. First, we had task forces because of RMI, remote method invocation. And can you think what it was? Probably you had several problems in your project. It had something.
It was too slow.
No, scalability. And what RMI had was distributed garbage collection. And this was the selling point of RMI. And how this worked is that if you had, let's say, 1,000 clients in one server, all of the 1,000 clients said, I'm alive. And if this 1,000 clients are doing this, this was a distributed denial of service attack, actually. And this killed the server. So if you had too many clients in RMI, just because telling the server, I'm alive, just polling the server, it could kill your server. So this was also interesting, that the distributed garbage collection was a feature and probably a problem in some projects. So it was one of the first interesting stuff where I started to see, not everything. You shouldn't always say yes. You should also question all the stuff, because at one point of time it just bits and bytes. Now
there were lots of learnings on that. That was the reason, because it was slow and can't really communicate efficiently. That was the reason for the T3 protocol, make it 10 times faster and scalable, just to put this on the JDBC connection pools, with different RMI connections, many thousands, millions possible. And this was the idea, to have clustered application servers.
Yeah, in your case, or in Sun had the solution, this was the Corba. They say, okay, Corba, this is where Corba scales better, and there was a RMI over IOP. This is where you say, okay, RMI doesn't scale, but Corba will. And this was actually why Corba became successful after RMI. I actually preferred RMI because RMI was very easy to use. There was no, the whole bootstrapping, naming these services. It still is. It is amazing, I would say. If RMI would be modernized, it would be way easier to use than anything else. So you have in JDK 1.5. So we will probably do it in the next episode.
Yeah,
but this was we get dynamic proxies, and there was nothing to do. You have an interface. It looks like I don't know whether you are aware of MicroProfile. We have MicroProfile REST client, and this RMI was very similar. So we could actually have injectable interfaces, and you are done. And then you just call the methods, and the protocol will be completely abstracted. So actually, we could use RMI to use behind the scenes microprofile REST client. Because there is, But forget about that. This is topic for the next session. We should start with JDK 1.2. And
I just had a story I think I need to tell. And this battle between CORBA products, and at that time, I joined from 1.1 JDK to Java J2 SE 1.2. I joined BA with the WebLogic, and they had two products: the M3 with CORBA product, as middleware, and the upcoming WebLogic. And before at Sun, I used to have the NetDynamics application server, which was bought by Sun. And there were lots of optimization. So I observed this handling of JDBC, of RMI, which was crucial to handle the data sources, the databases, that stuff. And on the other side, with the Swing graphical API on that version 1.2, it was obvious that you got your UI and it will improve. And then thousands of people just got into this front end stuff. So we saw this as a project always from three tiers, from the front end, the middle tier, and the back end at that time. And that was a dramatic architecture change. And I remember the largest bank at that time in Germany, and I was invited to a CORBA conference.
Okay.
And in Frankfurt. And I just so we had people there from Borland and other companies, and they had applications building on CORBA. Deutsche Telekom did the DCE stuff with their own branding. Everything was expressing himself for new changes and flavors, but it was complicated. It was too complicated, but it was more aligned to the C++ world, and small talk even. So I was invited to that conference, 200 people or more in the room in a nice location in Frankfurt downtown, Taunusanlage, and so all the people were there, the CORBA incumbents, and showing the books about CORBA. And I just had one slide about we have CORBA, we have this bridging stuff to RMI. There is something like interoperability to make some stubs, but I have something different. I have an application server here based on Java, and that was something I learned immediately after my talk, which was the only one different on Java. I had 10 projects at this bank. They said, we want to get rid of CORBA. We want to do the Java thing. We believe that. And the head of this department who was organizing the conference, he said, "Hey, Wolfgang, that was the last time you did that here.
Okay.
Next time we capture all the things you talk about here, but at that time they can't stop it. And the bank changed for hundreds of projects running on that, and it became the standard application server on the technology. The technology Java was the thing to move it. Otherwise, application servers wouldn't be invented and were useless. And this was the initial start in 99, 2000, and we just had one bank there trying to have distributed applications running on Java with middle tier, and this was Charles Schwab. That was the first one in San Francisco.
Okay.
This was something here in Germany. It took some years, or at least 1 year later, to really build projects relying on Java technology. So everything was there. The baseline was JDK 1.1 and J2 SE 1.2. Made it just better. And it turns out, the CORBA interoperability is just to embrace existing stuff. And the next thing was, how can we parallelize this with the collections framework? Yeah, this was magic at that time. Yeah, people said, okay, we come through the collection framework. This was difficult, but they loved to be in that step. There were no doubt about that. This is the right language. That the middleware stuff was evolving. Yeah, with the application servers, and then everything was there. Yeah, and the Corba group was slightly going down. And they can't interoperate.
My history behind Corba was a little bit different. Also, my experience. So I liked RMI, a remote method invocation. I used T3, but it's a little bit later. The WebLogic came later for me, and I had just used T3 without any thinking. So I knew this like optimized RMI. So this was for me T3.
Multiplied by 10.
Yeah,
10 times
but
faster.
What was this? Yeah, but was this the same architecture, I would say, or the same feeling? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And Corba, this was like, if I came in a new project, they were always smart ass architects or whatever, right? They say RMI doesn't scale. Forget it, kid. We have Corba. This is scalable and this is language independent. And I was so fascinated by the Corba. One point of time, I tried to read the books, and they were always thick books. And I remember one was like a bus and that everything. And I couldn't get the point until I realized why it's so complicated, because in my world, there was just Java. I didn't have any different languages than Java. But what Corba did, they had to map, the data types between Java to other languages. This was the first complication. And the next complication, I don't know whether you remember, there was the distinction in Corba, pass by value or pass by reference. And you wouldn't want it to pass by reference. It was, I think there was like a out parameter, which you can specify, which was a stub, which was passed to your interface, and you could call it back. And this made it a little bit complicated, and was also complicated was the bootstrapping. You had to find the naming server first, and then with the naming servers, you can find, the actual server. And this was in Java one-liner, naming.lookup, I think. Something like this in Java, or remote.lookup. And in Corba, it was way more complicated. So it was like I was forced to at least, be good enough with Corba to explain why we don't use Corba or why we use Corba. Because otherwise, you would be killed by projects. Everyone wanted to have Corba. Everyone was convinced Corba is the way to go. IOP is the way to go. RMI is not portable. Then they found out, the problem with distributed garbage collections. Or even if we had 3 clients, they say it will never scale. We will have to use Corba. And then we got later RMI over IOP, which was a hybrid. This was like RMI over Corba IDL protocol. But
this was really later, as you mentioned, and at that time, coming from client server, distributed objects, and then I remember the book Java and Corba. It was just the view from the history. And RMI was something on the Cisco's routers. The protocol need to be established on the firmware. It was totally different, and it was not compatible with Corba. This comes later with 1.3 of Java that they had more compatibility, but it wasn't stoppable at that time. Because the package throughput, it improved on RMI with dedicated vendor implementations. The support. The protocol support was really evolving and getting more performance, and all the stuff around, from IDL stubs, and this was just housekeeping, but it was a total new thing with a new protocol. You need to transport on routers. So enterprises were concerned about how we have something. Why have we this into our network? Is it secure? These were the questions, and the Corba stuff was so secure that you can't. Sometimes you can't really get through it to access it easily for applications. It was harder to programming it, and on the pressure of Java with upcoming UIs was interesting. Our first application at this transport logistic company was about office supplies, finding a pencil in a company with 150,000 people. And these kind of stuff, we make it proof with small projects, and then we collected train wagons in the right order. We sorted, and these kind of things. And we just used small projects. And they used to have to done it before with Corba, with C++ and Smalltalk. And this change, you saw it after 1.2 to Java 1.3, this is optimized and at the burning points where you really feel pain in the past. And at that time, it was clear as RMI was really adapted to be compatible with Corba. You could embrace existing projects and make it new and better and faster and easier at that time.
I thought we will cover JDK 1 too, but we should cover something else instead. IDEs. We completely forget about that. And the last thing about Corba is, what I remember back then, there was a huge fight between Orbix and VisiBroker. And the VisiBroker was bought by Boland, and the company before was VisiGenix, because we had to evaluate Orbix versus VisiBroker over and over again. And what turned out is that there was one thing where VisiBroker was better, and we used this Boland Orb everywhere. I forgot what it actually was, but and the Orbix was not. Then it was just right off with the Orbix. And so you mentioned Corba, and I thought about the product, so I came out to JBuilder, and I'm now in the article about the JBuilder IDE. And the amazing part is, JBuilder supports JDK 1.0, and the verdict of the article is they will have a superior JDK 1.1 release, which is 1.1 support. And what I started with, I'm pretty sure I used Notepad at the beginning and just Java C, and then in the commercial projects there was always questions about the IDEs, and I had almost all of them. So I started Visual Studio. Visual Age for Java was later. It was around 2000, but it looked.
It was earlier. It was from the San Francisco project of IBM.
Yeah, San Francisco framework. This also later.
This and Visual Age for Java was then, and it was complicated.
Yeah,
and so I did the same.
Which IDEs you used? Which IDEs?
The JBuilder stuff. Boland was because of the compiler stuff from Pascal, from C, as well from the Microsoft C compiler. But Boland was really a large company, and the JBuilder stuff was the number one at that time. And you need to buy this IDE.
Yeah, of course.
You can't get it for free. And the Eclipse stuff opened up.
Yeah, Eclipse was later. Was way later.
Yeah.
At the beginning,
this was
at the beginning, I started with, of course, Notepad. But then I don't know what was first. Visual Cafe from Symantec. I think I had to use this first in a project, Visual Cafe. Then JBuilder came in, and I bought by myself Java Studio Workshop and Java Studio from Sun, because I was a Sun fanboy, and I thought, if company creates Java and they create also a tooling for Java, it has to be better than the others. This was my thinking. And now the funny story about that. So it costs 200 Deutschmarks, DMs, which is about 100 euros, both. I remember this. It was not expensive. But at Sun Microsystems, I probably told you already the story, it was no way to buy that without being a Sun customer. So I just bought the IDE, and then I got a phone call from a Sun manager, and they interviewed me why I need this. So I explained them everything. I say, okay, sounds reasonable, but you have to become an enterprise client. Okay, no problem. And then I got a nice books from Sun with all the servers and everything, and I think the book was more expensive than the 100 euros. But I remember I was able to buy whatever I wanted from the book, but I had no money back then, right? So I could actually order, I don't know how far it went, but for 10,000 euros a server, and I would probably get it. And for me it was a strange experience, and I actually back then I felt important, because I ordered an IDE and I get call from a manager from Sun Microsystems, and they asked me why I need it, And for me, I thought, I was important, but but what I didn't recognize back then is that Sun actually was in charge of selling hardware, and they had no idea how to deal with the software. So, and for me, it was, oh wow, they find me because probably I wrote an article back then, and now I'm an important man because I get the IDE. So I do the Java Studio Workshop and Creator, which I liked. Visual Cafe, a couple of projects, and Borland was the winner for me. So I used the Borland. There was standard. We used the professional, and some of my clients used the enterprise edition, and the enterprise edition came with the Corba stuff. So you had the VZ Broker and stuff like that. So and back then, I don't know whether you remember, there was a page, Programmer's Paradise. You remember that? And on the Programmer's Paradise website, you could order the IDEs. So this was like heaven. I was every day I was in Programmer's Paradise page. Let's see. I don't even know whether it's still alive. And I could order the IDEs or see what new. And one IDE is MetroWorks Code Warrior. So, and I really like the name. But there was no project. I think one project did use that. It came from C++, and they had also Java offer. But I had no opportunity to use them. I tried NetBeans, but I didn't like it at all back then. So I think it came also later. But at the beginning, it was crazy for me. It was... there had no class path. You had to mount jars. It was complete esoteric what they did that. So I never liked that at the beginning. So this was the IDE story.
Yeah. So we used to have on the Windows side the JBuilder was really a favorite. But on the other side was VI and Emacs on the Linux. On the Unix System 5 Release 4 distributions at that time. It was before Linux and. So we had not an overarching IDE at that time. So we just used what we had on Unix systems and on upcoming Windows systems. So developer places were more like the upcoming Mac systems. That was something with C compiler stuffed on that. Yeah. So. This one and only single IDE that wasn't quite feasible for me because I had always different systems and need to work what I can get on that system. And there were always a thing how you get the files towards the IDE back and forth and this kind of stuff at that time. And it was interesting as JBuilder evolves. And I want to mention it. Eclipse was about to open up the market, and then it was completely gone. It was democratized and free. So that was the downturn of Borland on that. Because they lost the Corba stuff because of Java. And they lost the IDE part on that because of the open Eclipse Foundation, and that was aligned to each Java release. So we get more and more features enrichment in the Java versions, and the IDE evolves to start with a single point to distribute your applications on the development side, not on the production side, just on the development side, how you organize this without any common repositories. And that was driven really by Java, because you need to have an IDE for new technology, and embracing the UI stuff, which was more and more important with Swing. And remember the JGoodies APIs libraries?
This came later, but the last thing is Visual Aids for Java, what I forgot to mention. I was forced by an insurance company to use that, and I liked the look and feel because it looked completely different, and for me it was beautiful. So it was how it was. It was the icons was everything. It was not Swing. It was different. So Borland was based on their own Swing classes called JBCL. This was like JBuilder Foundation library, but I remember JBCL somehow, and Foundation classes. And the Visual Aids for Java drove me crazy because this was the only IDE where you never saw the source code entirely. So you had, if you click on the class, you only see the signature of the class. So if you clicked on the method, you only saw the code of the method. But what I wanted to have, I wanted to see the entire class. And what I did back then, you had to export the code to see the source code. So I exported the entire project to a folder, then use my editor, and then saw what's going on. And the reason for that is Visual Edge for Java had an internal database which stored the source code. And this was no way they had the Java files were not existing. So this was a complete different experience. And I was in a larger project when they got problems with that because the project was too large and it was no more efficient enough. And this killed Visual Edge for Java in the project, and they replaced that with Eclipse back then, but it was later. Wolfgang, we covered the first 2 years of 25 years. I think, right? So this was like 3 years, so not that bad. But this was with some, foundation for future episode. If you have time, we can probably move a little bit faster then, because there were some releases which are not that significant. I would say the 1.0, 1.1, and 1.2 were huge. This 1.3 is minor, some fun stories, but just performance optimizations. 1.4 as well, but it's not like complete revolution what happened at the beginning. And we should also RMI. What we should also talk a little bit the next time was actually the reason why .NET happened, right? With this JVisual and plus and the story, the lawsuit and so forth. So
that's exactly the point. The base platform of Java was made at that time. Was 1.1 and improvements 1.2 and some hotspot housekeepings with 1.3. But then it just slowed down at that time. And just evolved with the innovation of generics in 1.5 or Java J2 SE5. And between that, it was more or less established. And this was worthwhile to have another talk on that.
Let's do it in a few weeks. Thank you a lot. And I expected something like this. So your idea was to cover all the features. It's okay, we could do this, but this is more interesting, to think what actually happened. And and how to learn from that. So it's So thank you for listening.
That's so great. How things could change in the podcast.
This is
Thanks
agile.
A lot.
This is agile. Your approach was more waterfallish, and I say we should actually iterate more. So thank you, and hear you next time.
Thank you, Adam.